Hello, my friends, hello, and welcome once again to the Rustic Von Lodge. And today it is time to wrap up February, my February wrap up. What have I read in February, and what am I gonna read in March? So, February was crazy, both in my personal life and in world events. I was just really busy this month. February, it's a short month, but this February feels like it's lasted forever. This is the longest February I could ever remember, actually. But yeah, I had just so much to do, and I had very little reading time during the week. So I would read as much as I could during the week and kind of catch up on weekends. And of course, world events have gone insane, and it's been unsettling to say the least what is going on in the world right now. Yeah, this stupid century isn't getting any better. So, yeah, there was that. There's all of that. So there's a lot. It's been a lot. And so, fortunately, February was February Fantasy Stories. February Fantasy Stories month. Fantasy Stories was a reading event created by the Bookish Bryants, a fantastic booktube channel you all should watch. And basically, it was an event to celebrate fantasy, to get people to read fantasy, basically shorter fantasy works, which are, usually fantasy fiction is gigantic novels that are like monstrous mammoths. But this was to get us to read shorter fantasy works, so novels 250 pages or under, or novellas, or short stories, or collections of short stories. And every week was a different theme. And I wasn't planning on doing this. I was planning on reading a mammoth, but I ended up doing it. And I'm glad I did because it was a lot of fun. I had a good time with it, and this was a month where, you just want to get as far away from the real world as possible because the real world is terrible. So I was happy to do February Fantasy Stories. So I'll talk about what I read and also what I'm going to be reading next month. So each week had a different theme, like I said. And the first week was classic fantasy, which is basically any fantasy story or novel that was written before 1971. And I read C.L. Moore's Jarrell of Jory. I don't have it with me, so I'll put up a picture. And I did a video on that book. I really enjoyed this book a lot. Fantastic set of stories from the old Weird Tales magazine about a female warrior. Really cool. Really unusual stories. Strange. They're weird. These are weird fantasies. Definitely weird tales, these stories. With a great main character. It was a lot of fun. So I had a good time with the first week with that. Hey, it's me jumping in here, interrupting my own video, because as I was watching this over, I realized I forgot to mention that I read 2 books in that first week, and the other book I read was The Bloody Chamber by Angela Carter, which was magnificent. So I'm kind of surprised I forgot when I was filming this video to talk about that book. I did make a whole video about it. It was the Sunday Penguin last weekend. Well, the weekend before last weekend, I guess, by the time this is coming out. But it was the last Sunday Penguin I did, was The Bloody Chamber by Angela Carter. Magnificent book. It's wonderful. Ooh, I read 2 books that first week. The first week of February was good for reading. So yeah, I'm just popping in here to mention The Bloody Chamber by Angela Carter, which you all should read. Okay, guys. The second week was Sword and Sorcery, which I read Swords Against Darkness, which was a collection, an anthology that was put together in the 1970s. I forget the year, and I don't have the book with me. But it was put together by Andrew J. Offutt. An interesting fellow, Andrew J. Offutt, who is known for being a very prolific writer of paperback porn, which apparently, that's something that happened in the 70s. I guess that used to be a thing. And this guy wrote a ton of it. I mean, a ton of it. A ridiculous amount, apparently. All lost now to the mists of time, probably. I can't imagine. I mean, I can't imagine too much of this stuff has survived, but maybe it has somewhere. But he also liked fantasy and science fiction, so he did a bit of that. He wrote some fantasy novels and some science fiction, and he put together a series of these anthologies, Swords Against Darkness. And this one was really fun. Most of the stories were really good. Ramsey Campbell has a story. The horror writer has a sword and sorcery story in this, which is, of course, horrific and disturbing, but really good. And there were a few really good stories in this anthology. So yeah, I enjoyed it. I will probably hunt down the next volume and read that, just because I did enjoy this so much. And it did give me a new respect for Ramsey Campbell because of his sword and sorcery, his ability as a sword and sorcery fantasy writer. I wouldn't have expected that from him when you consider the type of horror that he writes. So yeah, he has a depth of talent, this guy. So I'm going to have to give his novels another shot. He never really worked out for me as an author, but I'm going to give him another try. Just on the strength of just that story, which was really good. So the third week, what? Did you hear some critter outside? Up at the Rustic Vaughan Lodge, there are critters, which just drives my little dog crazy. Hey, it's okay. It's just some, fox or something. It's no big deal. I know. She's going to sniff at the door now. Anyway, where was I? You interrupted me. Anyway. Say hello. Say hello. Terrorizing my video as usual, little friend. Okay. Stop making so much noise. Anyway, where was I? Oh yes, week 3. Week 3 was dark fantasy. Now for dark fantasy, I had to read some Kane stories by Carl Edward Wagner because those are, as I might have mentioned once or twice in my Kane video, dark. They're dark. They are dark stories. So, yeah, I read the complete stories of Kane. I was just going to read one paperback collection, but then I thought, why don't I just read all of them? I'll just read all of them because I've got all of them in one book, so I did. And I really enjoyed that. It made me remember just how great Carl Edward Wagner really was, what a talent he was, and how good this series is. So that was fun. That brings us to week 4 with urban fantasy. Actually, I don't have to poke my finger up because I actually have the actual book that I read for urban fantasy. I read this one. This is The Third Cry to Legba and Other Invocations by Manly Wade Wellman. This is the Selected Stories of Manly Wade Wellman Volume 1, which was published by Nightshade Books. Am I right? Is it Nightshade? It is Nightshade. I knew it was. So this is a 5-volume set, which is now ridiculously expensive. But it's an excellent set. And I chose this one because this book has his series of John Thunstone stories in it. John Thunstone was kind of an occult investigator, a occult detective like they had back in the day. Like Weird Tales had Jules de Grandin, the occult detective. But John Thunstone, his stories are more concerned with magic. There are a lot of magic, a lot of sorcerers, a lot of witches, that kind of thing. And it really is an urban fantasy series of stories. Uh, it really, when you think about what we normally consider as urban fantasy now, which is probably best exemplified by the Dresden Files. The Dresden Files, I mean, this is the ancestor to that. This is the ancestor to the Dresden Files because it was the same kind of thing where we have this character, Thunstone, who is not himself a wizard. That is true. But he knows all about sorcery. He knows how to fight sorcery. He occasionally uses magical objects. He has a magic sword that he fights vampires, werewolves, and other strange things with. His main opponent is a wizard, his arch nemesis. It's a fun series of stories, and these appeared in Weird Tales in the 40s. Manly Wade Wellman came after Lovecraft, after Lovecraft had passed away, after Robert E. Howard had passed away, after Clark Ashton Smith had moved on from fiction to other things. And so there was a void there in Weird Tales that had to be filled with a prolific writer who wrote entertaining stories, and that was Manly Wade Wellman. Even Seabury Quinn was writing less at this point. Seabury Quinn, the star of Weird Tales, who created Jules de Grandin, the detective, the occult detective. And it's a fun set of stories. It's fun just because of all the magic and the monsters and all of that stuff. Thunstone's kind of a fun character. These are light stories. They're not dark at all, really, despite what they're about. They are horror stories, basically. Horror fantasy stories. But they're just not that horrific. They're more fantasy, really. And they're fun. And there's a couple things that make them stand out. First of all, Manly Wade Wellman name drops a lot. We've got a shared universe going on with Thunstone and all of Manly Wade Wellman's other characters. He had a lot of other characters he wrote about. Also, I mentioned Jules de Grandin. Thunstone just happens to be best friends with Jules de Grandin, and he's always talking to Jules de Grandin on the phone and sending messages to Jules de Grandin. So, there's that going on. And also, the Necronomicon pops up in here. H.P. Lovecraft pops up as somebody that John Thunstone knew. Lovecraft, all his stories were based on the truth, according to this. So it's just fun. It's a good time. And it's kind of hard to find these stories now. I don't think they're available on ebook. Anything Manly Wade Wellman is hard to find. If you ever do see anything with this guy's name on it, pick it up. You occasionally will. He wrote science fiction. He wrote all kinds of stuff. And he wrote for years, man. He wrote all the way through the 80s. When did he die? Sometime in the 80s, I believe. I guess I could look in this book and that would tell me. Probably. Maybe. See, I should look at this stuff ahead of time. I'm not going to look. It's in here somewhere. I'll put it down below. But yeah, he wrote forever. All the way from the pulp era up through that time, through the 80s. He wrote novels. He had a lot of popular series. And all of that stuff is hard to find now. Out of print. Everything's out of print. And so, yeah, to find Manly Wade Wellman's writing, you pretty much have to spend a ton of money on eBay or just get lucky when you're shopping in those used bookstores. So keep an eye out for Manly Wade Wellman. He wasn't the greatest writer in the world, but he's a fun writer. And if you're interested in pulp, he was a major voice in the pulps. A lot of cool stuff. So, yeah, that's how I finished out the month. Was for urban fantasy with this guy, and I had a good time with it. It was excellent. And I finished this today, and I'm filming this. This is Sunday, so tomorrow is the last day of the month. So which brings us to next month, and what the heck I'm going to be reading next month. Well, it's March Mystery Madness, which I did want to take part in because it sounds like so much fun. But I had already decided on reading this as my mammoth for next month. First of all, I want to read a bunch of mammoths this year. And so this is going to be actually my first mammoth because I got caught up in the February fantasy stories. Shogun, and I'm reading this along with Mark at Book Time with Elvis and some other people. A bunch of people are reading Shogun. And I've never read Shogun. I've seen the TV show. I saw the miniseries years ago, whenever the heck it was on. It was the 70s, right? It was forever ago. I was a kid. But I remember it. Everybody was talking about this show. Yeah, it's now the colossal television saga that is making entertainment history. It made entertainment history, apparently. So yeah, so this is what I'm reading next month. And if next month is anything like this past month, I'm not going to have time to read much else because this book is 1,200 pages long. And so I'll probably have time to read this and maybe one other book. And if I read one other book, it's going to be, I'm going to continue with Stephen King because I'm reading every book by Stephen King. And the next book that I'm reading from Stephen King is Dance Macabre. So that'll be the next Stephen King. Sorry about that. I got a phone call. I forgot to turn off a... Oh, well. I was talking about Dance Macabre. That's what I'm going to read from Stephen King. That's the next Stephen King book I've got on my list to read. Reading Stephen King's books from the 80s this year, or at least as many of them as I could fit in. I've been enjoying my Stephen King project, my Read Every Book by Stephen King project. So I've got that, and I'm going to read that if I have time to read anything other than this. But both of those books I'm really looking forward to. Really looking forward to this. I'm going to be starting this tomorrow morning. Man, it's going to be awesome. So yeah, that's all I have to say basically for my wrap up and what's coming up. And I'm hoping next month is less insane and that things get better in the world. I don't think they're going to, but I'm hoping. And I'm hoping all of you are doing as well as can be. And I will catch you tomorrow with something else. Tomorrow is Comic Book Wednesday, so I'll be talking about a comic book tomorrow on Comic Book Wednesday. And then Books That Time Forgot is on Thursday. It's been moved to Thursday this month, or this week. Okay, guys. I'll catch you next time.